So I'm Margaret Brodkin, and I'm the Director of Funding the Next Generation. And I'm going to give you an overview of what's involved in putting a measure on the ballot for 2024. And the assumption I'm making, and this is a very general overview. And we do a 3-day institute on how to do this. I will come to your to where you are if you want, or do special sessions for the group in your community and really dig deep in this. This is to give you the broadest overview of what's involved in this. And the 3 people you're going to be hearing from, I'm going to give you an overview. Then Jesus Sanchez, who is the founder of Gente Organizada, he's going to tell you why they're already starting now in Pomona for 2024. And then Nicole, who is our star campaign consultant, who has helped everybody along the way with this process, and who has, a major player both in state and national political circles as a campaign consultant. Will sort of give you an overview of what's involved in a campaign. So I'm ready to start this, and people will join us as they join us. So I always have. So the first question is, why would you want to do a ballot measure at all? So we're talking about ballot measures for money for children, youth, and families. People come to this with all kinds of different ideas, like, oh, we want to, create alternatives to detention, or we want to have fun childcare. Or we want to fund all of them. But basically, this is for people who want to put a measure on the ballot or are thinking about it, to get money for kids, because children and youth are in crisis. And we know that so much of what we want to do costs money. We know that funding equity is absolutely essential. We know that acting locally, we're talking about putting measures on the local ballot. And as my colleague in DC says, what gets funded gets done. So the benefits of a local campaign is, the local level is where engagement happens. When you get money at the local level, you can leverage state and federal dollars. You can focus on prevention, which you can't do with state dollars. You can, it facilitates local accountability. You create some kind of department or something to oversee your money. It generates public enthusiasm, and inevitably, when you raise dollars through a ballot measure at the local level, you get more money. So the benefits of putting a measure on the ballot versus fighting the good fight, which I think we should all do every year to get money in our city and county budgets for kids. But the major way to raise new money is you have to put something on the ballot. And I hate to say it, it's a tax, it's some kind of revenue measure. When you put a measure on the ballot, it's more sustainable. You build community and you build in accountability. Here is a picture of the campaign in Monterey County, and you just get a flavor for what a campaign can do. So the only way to get new money is on the ballot, and the way to get money reallocated, which is what they're doing in Pomona, which is what we did in San Francisco, which was the first ballot measure, by the way, to create a dedicated children's fund in the state of California. And I used to say it was the first in the country, but it turns out there was one in Florida in the 40s. So we can't claim that. Am I starting too soon? Or they're trying to think many should do it? We need some sort of basic background about what we're talking about, or is everybody with me? You can put questions in the chat. So just to repeat, we're talking about putting measures on the ballot for 2024 for funding for children, youth, and families for whatever priority you want to set for yourself. So the question is, why did I write everybody an email against the advice of some of my best friends, like, oh my God, you better start now. You better start thinking about this. So I'm not intending to put everyone into a panic, but I do want to, give some advice based on what we've learned. So when I started this effort, like 6 or 7 years ago, and we had a lot of measures on the ballot. The first 4 measures we put on the ballot, they all lost. And half the measures we've seen on the ballot to fund kids have lost. And why did they lose? Not because a majority of people didn't want it, but because of the crazy state laws about ballot measures and how many people have to vote for a dedicated fund. And by dedicated means it goes to something specific like youth and children and families. So until a fairly recent California Supreme Court decisions, it was the going practice, you needed a 2/3 vote. So we would have people get a 60% vote, a 65% vote. So now we know the way to do this and not need a 60% vote, a 2/3 vote, 66, is to gather signatures. Here are the young people in Sacramento delivering their signatures, is to gather signatures and to put a measure on the ballot from the people, not the politicians. That's the rationale. So honestly, I did this. This is sort of Margaret's panic page, but what I want people to understand, I'm working my way backwards. And by the way, we're going to send this out to everyone. Don't take notes. We're going to send out a tape. We're going to send out all the slides. I'm going to send you all kinds of materials about what kinds of measures are possible. I've written a book about this whole process. Nicole has written a book about what a campaign is involved. You can link to all these books, but basically I'm thinking backwards and thinking, oh my God, actually we're not talking about November 24th. We're talking about August 2024. That's when things get put on the ballot. And then people have to have 6 months to gather signatures. And then the earlier you gather signatures, the cheaper it is. And then you need months to draft this thing, and you need to build a case and do all the things I'm about to tell you about. So this is a more organized time frame. Are people following me here? So if you started in August, and you would have until, let's make a couple of assumptions. This is just a general timeline. You don't have to follow this timeline. You can start later. You could have started 2 years ago and still, be working on this. There's a ballot measure in Monterey on the ballot now. They actually started 6 years ago thinking about putting a measure on the ballot. So this is a timeline, assuming that you do want to gather signatures, assuming that you want to start early gathering signatures so that you can afford to pay for signature gathering. If you want to start later gathering signatures, add 3 months. If you want to get your legislators, like i.e. your city council or your county board of supervisors, to put a measure on the ballot, add 6 months to this calendar, maybe more. But this is assuming you want to do this the most cost effective, a way where you only need a 50% vote. You would start now and you would make your case, and I'm going to tell you about all that, build your base, you would research all your options. By June of 2023, you'd hire a lawyer to develop your proposal and draft a measure. In October through April, you would submit your measure for summary, you'd gather signatures, you'd submit your signatures, and that's if you want to get the signatures as cheaply as possible. And then you'd have from May to November to fundraise, to mount a campaign. It would be placed on the ballot in August, and then in on November 5th of 2024, you will win. So that is why I woke up in the middle of the night and said, I better start talking to people about, thinking about getting started. So we have learned a lot through this initiative. And I learned a lot in 1991 when we put the measure on the ballot for San Francisco. And then we reauthorized it, and then we reauthorized it again. So I followed all these campaigns. Here's what works and what needs to be in place. Does it need to be in place today? Not necessarily. Does it need to be in place within 6 months? Absolutely. You need a convening organization. You need dedicated staff. Now that can be volunteer. You need to have a coalition that can work together. You need people who are ready for political engagement. You need some baseline information about what's going on in your community, what the needs of kids are, what the poverty rate is, maybe even what you're spending on kids. And you need a group that's has some agreement about their priorities. The people who've dropped out along the way of this process are the people who were not totally passionate about this. If you are passionate about this, you can do a lot. It does help to have a political champion. Though it's not necessary, maybe someone on your board of supervisors, maybe a former supervisor, maybe a state official. And that really has helped the people who are interested in doing this, but it is not necessary. So here's the roadmap for what you would do over the next year if you're interested in this, or if you want to, have your city council put it on the ballot, or if you want to sort of wait to collect signatures. And the reason I'm sort of wound up about signatures and starting early is like, people pay between $7 and $25 per signature to have somebody collect signatures for them to put a measure on the ballot by voter initiative, where you will only need 50% plus one. So hence this sort of introducing people to these ideas and what needs to happen. So you're making, and this is not a linear process. These are the things you do, and I'll give you a flavor for what they are. So you're making your case, you're building your base, you're developing your proposal, and then you're mounting your campaign between now and then on November 5th, you win. That's November 5th, 2024. So the reason this takes time and you don't do it overnight is, here are some things people do in order to make the case of why do we need a ballot measure for kids? Why do we need more money for kids? And you can do some of these things or all of these things. People issue report cards. People do what are called fiscal maps. A map of how much you're currently spending in your city or county to identify major gaps. In the picture, this is a group of young people sitting around the table in Stockton, writing a Children and Youth Bill of Rights as part of the process of documenting their need and developing a consensus agenda. So, you get in front of policymakers every time you can to talk about unmet children's needs. And when I say children, I think of 17-year-olds as children. I'm old enough to do that, but I'm talking about children and youth. And just by the way, we're going to do a poll again the beginning of next year, the next calendar year. But right now, based on the polling we've done, here are some of the priorities that are in people's minds, sort of it isn't really post-pandemic. I keep thinking it is, but it's not. Childcare and mental health have really risen to the top. And the idea here is that people understand the feds are doing something, but they really believe and understand that stuff needs to happen at the local level too. So here's an example of in LA, how they document their case. Like, if we had this money, this is how many full-time peace builders we could have and intervention workers if we reallocated money from the sheriff and law enforcement, and you can do a ballot measure to do that. So that's step one. And this is not in order. Then, we're talking about building a base. You can't do a ballot measure, just by yourself or with one group or with one kind of group or just with youth organizers. You have to build a strong base, public information sessions involving unions and the faith-based community and civic organizations. These are the wonderful people of Richmond who passed a measure, who are organizers at heart and really understood how important organizing was. These are different ways to organize public support, conferences, mailings, public forums. We used to do this in San Francisco, Speak Up for Kids Day at City Hall. Then the third thing you have to do, you have to develop a proposal. You can't just say, oh, I want to put a measure on the ballot. We know all the needs, et cetera. And these are some of the kinds of things you have to decide. What do you want funded? You have to learn about what the legal options are and what's politically possible in your community. Do you have champions? What will the opposition look like? And you need to build your political capital over time to understand the political landscape. And you need to think about what your network, whether it's a coalition or, what your capacity is, whether you are going to be able to have volunteers, whether you have the capacity to raise money. Is there a consensus, or do you fight all the time? Well, that's just the nature of the beast. But so when you get to developing your proposal, ultimately you're going to have a ballot measure that has all these things in it, which is what are the goals and what services are funded and what is the oversight body and what does the administration look like and who runs it. This, I think, was the rationale for the measure in Richmond. I don't know if you can see it. This is just some examples of rationale for measures. And this is the goals of the measure in Richmond, for instance. And, like they didn't just sit down and write this overnight. They had meeting after meeting after meeting to say, what do we want the goals to be? Young people were involved in it. And it was a community building process as part of developing a measure. The second thing you have, the other part of, developing a proposal is like you have to know what revenue options you have. And I'm going to send you a legal brief on what all the possibilities are. We have all kinds of materials. You don't have to absorb this right now. But, most people have done either what I call a set aside, which is what we did in Richmond, in Oakland, in San Francisco, which is put a measure on the ballot saying, in our case, it was like 5% of the general fund needs to go to a dedicated youth fund. Or I think in Sacramento, they tried to make it 4%, which is what I think it was in Richmond. So you say, I want a portion of the revenue base of my city or county to go to a dedicated fund for children or youth. So you can do that, or you can look at what kind of new revenue is possible. In Sonoma, this election, they're doing a sales tax. In Monterey, they're doing a parcel tax. In Sacramento, they're doing a cannabis tax. So these are all things that you have to learn enough about and say, what are we going to do? And then this is all in the legal brief that whatever you decide requires a different kind of vote. But I highlighted that if you want to do a special tax, you have to do a voter initiative, and then it only requires a simple majority. If you do a set aside of your existing dollars, that too only requires a majority. So I'm going to stop here. I have a whole session on lessons from the campaigns, which I will send out to you, and they're pretty self-explanatory. The only one I'll show you is the big thing that the folks in Richmond like to talk about, which is that the whole process of this is what matters the most. Even if you lose, if you've developed a shared vision and you've engaged people and you, it is worth the effort. So people think a lot about what kind of process. This is not a technical exercise. This is a engagement process, a vision building process. I'm now going to stop sharing and introduce you to Jesus, who is going to tell you why he is excited to be starting now. And maybe you can say a few things about, you know, how long it's taken you to get where you are now.
Thank you, Margaret. Just want to make sure, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good? Perfect. All right. Awesome. So thank you, folks. My name is Jesus Sanchez, he, him, his pronouns. I'm with Pomona Kids First, but also work at Gente Organizada, a 501c3 nonprofit where this ballot initiative idea was, in a sense, incubated, right? So Pomona Kids First is setting out to create funding in our city of Pomona for youth and families, right? And we are looking, we have a very broad definition of youth, and we are intentional about our inclusion of transitional age youth. So going up to 25 years old and working with our young adults, right? And the driving force, just to give a little bit more context, the driving force behind this initiative was ongoing and 5+ year campaign by youth organizers in the city of Pomona to increase intentional earmarked funding for kids in the city, right? And like most of our cities, I think throughout, the majority of our funding here goes towards policing. Before we started working on different issues, we did not have any pre-arrest youth diversion programs in place to ensure that young people were not just being thrown into the criminal justice system when they started to experiment or act out. This is all connected, right? This is all connected. So what PKF, or Pomona Kids First, is setting out to do is to create a budget set aside of 10% of our general fund in the city. And that those funds would then create a Department of Youth and Families in the city of Pomona. We actually started late in 2022. And we were really kind of up against it in terms of the calendar and the timeline. So we have already, this was our first time attempting a ballot initiative as a group of organizers that live out here. We successfully filed it. We went through that kind of that process that Margaret's right. It's a little technical, but once you kind of get through that, it's straight to the point. You just need signatures, right? And that is a huge daunting task, but can be done, has been done. And I think a lot of us should be aspiring to do this as I think an avenue to initiate change, right? And to strengthen some of the demands we have of local government. So we had a failed attempt, and we realized right away that our strategy was not going to work, especially in this climate, right? We're working with a lot of youth and immigrant families that have been severely impacted by the pandemic and the public health crisis that we're all facing, as well as the economic crisis that we're all facing, which limits the availability of your potential volunteer if that's your base, right? So we were humbled very quickly. And I will say, though, we entered into this and we always kept an open mind in terms of even just processing our success or failures, right? And looking at them as opportunities for growth and really prioritizing the fact that we're doing this to learn. Because it was our first time, and we're doing this to develop leaders to be able to really kind of create a blueprint to do this again, because youth funding isn't the only issue that needs to get addressed in our city, right? And there are other potential ballot initiatives that we're exploring, right? And young people are the ones crafting these ordinances and like policy documents, which I absolutely love. So like Margaret said, we decided to pivot and look at 2024 fairly early on, and we're now looking. So we let me go back a little bit. Margaret mentioned something in terms of, you know, if it's not funded, it's probably not going to happen. I don't think she said it that way, but that was the gist of it, right? And that's what we prioritized. And I found out as one of the leads that was taking on the fundraising duties for Pomona Kids First, that like most everything we've ever done as a community out here, you usually have to build it and get it going for folks to actually believe it, right? Like, I don't think our community or the organizations we belong to have had the privilege to just pitch an idea and get it funded. Like, you usually have to get it going first, and then folks will take a look at it. And that was our experience. So we had to just dive into it, file for 2022, start having conversations with funders where they're like, oh, what's your idea? It's like, no, we're not waiting for you. We're doing this. We're trying to go already, and come help us, right? So we've had a huge fundraising push. We've been in communication with signature gathering companies to alleviate some of the expectations that we were putting on our volunteer base for signature gathering. And I'm very hopeful that we will be on the ballot for 2024 because some of our fundraising success. And shout out to Margaret for their support with this, because we wouldn't have been able to get where we're at right now without them and funding the next generation. So we are looking at potentially starting signature gathering as early as December of 2022, but potentially around the new year of 2023. Trying to give ourselves ample time to do a lot of the like community outreach, public education around this, and really priming us to just focus on get out to vote, right? And turning people out to vote for this, which is also going to require another fundraising push on our end. I think the biggest kind of lesson learned for us as an organization, and like just looking at this as like a strategy to tap into, we, as soon as we started to have conversations with potential partners that support with signature gathering, we just straight up couldn't afford them. Like, I don't see as, you know, folks that maybe are incubating these policy ideas in their nonprofit world and establishing kind of these C4 wings to do the ballot initiative work, unless you have access to some real serious funding, that the traditional timeline before some of these big elections, we're going to get priced out. And that was our realization, that we just straight up couldn't afford it. So we had to find a different period of time, I guess kind of the off season, you could call it, to partner with some of these signature gathering companies, and really also reach out to community when they're not getting inundated by everyone else and all other candidates and other initiatives, right? So that's what we're setting out to do. We still have a lot of work to do in terms of making this a reality, but we're hoping that this is going to work. And I'll stop there to just kind of leave some time for potential questions. And,
that sounds good, but can you say two things first? One is, you know, just very quickly, how long you spent drafting the, the damn measure, and two, why you have to use paid signature gatherers and can't do it all by volunteers. Because what I would say is, everybody thinks, well, I don't have to pay a signature gathering. I'm gonna, you know, I got all these wonderful people. They don't understand they need 10,000 signatures, or, you know, they need thousands and thousands of signatures, and that rarely happens with volunteers. So just say a word or two about that.
Yeah, I think it is rare, right? And I always tell Margaret too that like we're still aiming to, at some point, I don't think it's going to be ready for 2024, but at some point be a equipped and organized enough to be able to pull this off with 100% volunteers. That's the goal for us, like long term, right? But being honest with ourselves and doing that introspection, we're not there yet. Like, we can't pull that off. And I think the just inherent challenges, like, these are folks who are volunteers who have life going on, right? And you just add some of the things that we're experiencing right now, related to the pandemic and economic implications of all of this. It really limited the availability of our people to execute this. So that was something that we had to come to terms with pretty quickly. In terms of how long it took us to draft this, I think it took us probably 4 to 6 months to finalize it. And we had young people at the helm. And once they finalized their first draft, we started to have some of their adult allies and a legal team that we brought on to make sure that, everything was on the up and up and compliant with our local city charter, because we're a charter city as well, and just kind of also state laws as well. So that was our process.
Yeah, and I will say, in response to one of the questions in the chat, we have a lot of examples of, ballot measures that people have used, and Jesus used the one from Richmond as a sort of model. But then it's hard work, and it's an incredibly sort of interesting and fun process, because once you have to put things in writing, all the rhetoric falls aside and you have to make concrete decisions. So I'm now going to call on Nicole to sort of share with us sort of her thoughts about what you should be starting to do and what a campaign then looks like.
Wonderful. I think I'm having some issues with the slides, so I think I'll just go sans slides. If that works. It's really good to see everyone. I'm Nicole Derse, one of the principals and co-founders at 50+1 Strategies. I've been doing campaigns a long time, most of the last almost 20 years, 18 years. I met Margaret way back when I was a staff person for the San Francisco Youth Commission 21 years ago, which is very, very exciting. And so I care very deeply about funding for children and youth programs, and also just deeply respect all the work that you all do every single day. Know that you guys understand your communities better than everyone. You understand what's needed in terms of the resources for children and youth. You understand the politics of your communities, but most of you probably have not worked on ballot measures before, have not led ballot measure committees before. And so my expertise here is really, what does the campaign look like, and what do you focus on? And so, just to kind of go back, Jesus and Margaret both talked a little bit about this, but what you need to be focusing on, what you need to be focusing on now, if you're really thinking about 2024, is, what does that policy look like, right? All that policy exploration. Policy exploration is different, it's really a lot of things you need to balance. 1, what does your community need? 2, what is doable? And 3, what is winnable, right? As you put together your coalition, you'll be surprised at who may oppose your ballot measure, right? We know that in theory, people want to do right by kids. They want to take action to support our kids, but when it comes down to it, it's really a question of money and where does those resources go? So if you're looking at a set aside, you're always going to need to think about, if it's about taking a piece of what already exists in the general fund, who's going to be upset about that? You need to have conversations with labor unions, because a lot of them are really looking at what is the pension, what is the support for workers, and how does that potentially take from what they have allocated for or want to see for workers. So you've got to have those conversations with labor. You got to have those conversations with public safety unions specifically, because we know that police and fire are often the ones that are most likely to oppose. So really thinking about who could oppose. If you don't have a set aside, if you're looking at new revenue, make sure you understand who's already looking at that new revenue as well. Is there a group of parks advocates that are trying to put a ballot measure on the ballot that same year, or transportation advocates. Understand, do that ballot landscape analysis so you can get a sense by talking to elected officials, by talking to other community leaders, what else is out there, right? You've got to start that now, because there are already ballot measures that didn't qualify for 2022 that are already qualified for 2024. So know what they are, right? Make sure you understand what's out there, potentially collecting signature. How is that going to interface? Sometimes people come together and build a coalition together and say, you know what, they're looking at a real estate transfer tax. So are we. Maybe we can come together and say half of that goes to kids, half of that goes to parks. It can be difficult to talk about and message the campaign if they're too far apart, but sometimes there is synchronicity there. Maybe it's a public health campaign and you can focus on youth mental health. So think about what that ballot landscape looks like. You want to do the polling and research. You want to start that now. So people should understand that once you create a campaign committee, you can only spend things directly on the election. And there are rules that exist, especially 90 days out from an election, right? So right now we're close to 90 days out from the 2022 election. So you can't use, campaign committee money. You can't use 501c3 money to do research 3-6 months out from a campaign, but you can do it before that, right? So a year out from a campaign, you can use 501c3 dollars to understand what messages are going to resonate most, as well as determining what policy is going to resonate most, right? So that polling and research, really looking at where's the electorate at, is really important. And you want to balance, you don't want to do a big poll, your one poll about your ballot measure today, because things are going to change. We know what's happening with inflation. We know what's happening with, folks' frustration with the way things are going right now. And, some of that may be similar a year from now, 2 years from now. Some of it may likely be different. So you got to balance when do you do that polling, but you want to do it early enough that you can use 501c3 dollars. So 6 months out or more, and early enough to shape your campaign, to understand what actually is going to resonate the most with the voters. So what kind of policy you want to put forth, what kind of revenue mechanism you want to look at, et cetera. The other piece, and Jesus and Margaret talked about this a lot, is developing that coalition. So thinking now about who do you need to win, right? The best coalition you can have to win is going to show the diversity of your whole community, saying, business and community leaders are together, Democratic and Republican Party are ideally standing together. Get realistic. Hard to get the Republican Party, but what can you do to neutralize opposition? The worst thing that happens to these campaigns is well-funded opposition or well-supported opposition. We did a campaign in Sacramento. They're going up there for the third time in 2022 this year, and it looks like they're going to win. But what they faced the last time around was a pretty popular mayor, pretty well-funded opposition. Fire union got involved, and they lost that campaign, got under 50+1. So really think about, how do you develop that coalition that's both neutralize opposition, but get strong support? That's going to lead to all the things that you need in your campaign. It's going to lead to fundraising. It's going to lead to getting those endorsements. It's going to lead to having those spokespeople who can talk about the campaign. You can start that coalition development now. Understand who are the players in your community. Again, some of you have tons of experience in the nonprofit space and understanding who is relevant in the advocacy space around children and youth funding, but you may not know who plays in campaigns. How powerful are particular Democratic clubs? Is there a Chamber of Commerce that often gets involved in campaigns? Is there a taxpayers group? Understand who that is. Do the work. You can look at all the stuff that's public on Department of Elections websites, and you can see who gave money to campaigns in the past. Start to understand that so you can know who's really important for you to have conversations with. The other thing you can do is develop your list, right? Think about what can you do now to get more people on your email list. Can you do a budget advocacy campaign in 2023 that's going to let you grow that list and really have more folks that can be engaged in a campaign once you launch? You can spend 501c3 dollars to develop that list that then can be used for a campaign later. And really start to think about, what does your budget need to look like? How do you create a fundraising plan that's going to allow you to win. Find out how much signatures are going to cost. We can give you estimates on that, now, right? And get a sense of, is it going to be $5 a signature, $7 a signature? How many valid signatures do you need? Start to really get a sense of that now, because that's your base budget. No matter what, you're going to need all the money it takes for signatures, and probably another $25,000 at minimum. Most of the time, you're going to need more than that. It depends where your polling is at. If you do a poll and it shows that you only need 50+1 and you're polling at 70% and you have no opposition, you're not going to need to spend a ton of money on your campaign. Maybe you just need, that campaign coordinator to coordinate volunteers, any legal fees that you may need, and the real basic amounts, the filing fees, the ballot argument fees, maybe a little bit of a digital ad campaign. But if you're polling at 55% and you need 50, you're going to need real money, because even if there's not opposition, there is going to be some anti-tax messaging on the ballot in 2024. I guarantee it. It may not be targeted your campaign, but what's done at the statewide level, what's done at other local ballot measures will impact how people think about your campaign. So always assume that, where you start at is likely to go down at least 10%. Even without a real well-funded opposition. It's not always the case, but that's what you should assume, because we know that people do default to no. So if you're finding yourself polling under 60%, if you have opposition, you're going to need serious money, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for sure. If you don't have opposition, you're polling at 60, you're probably going to need at least another $50,000, $100,000 to get over the finish line, even if you don't have opposition. So start to think about it. Now, some of this you can't plan ahead. You don't know exactly, but you can get a sense. What have people spent in the past? Where is your polling at? I'm a resource with Funding the Next Generation. Margaret's organization, will just pay me and my team for our time. We can do early consults with you. We can sit down with you, via Zoom or in person. And this September, as you're thinking through this, and certainly next year, we'll have plenty of capacity, to spend some time working with you. What kind of analysis can we do of previous campaigns for you? How can we think about, what your win number is, how much you need to win this campaign, be it 50+1 or be it 2/3, right? And work with you backwards to figure out what a budget should look like and what your fundraising plan needs to be. So, in terms of the phases, we've got that pre-campaign planning does need to start 2 years out or more. And Margaret was right about having this session today. It really is critical that we're starting to think about that planning now. About a year out, you need to be pretty clear about whether or not you're going to move forward or not, because we need to start our signature gathering effort. Usually we want to be ready to start signature gathering about a year before the ballot, the election day, because you want to be out there collecting signatures, early in to 2024, if not beginning in 2023 in the fall. So if you don't know, whether or not you're moving forward in 2022, that's okay. But I would say, give yourself through the middle of next year, by July 1, 2023, you should probably know if you're going or not. So you can move on signature gathering and fundraising in the fall of next year, and that you can really dig into that policy development and get that policy right, whether or not you need to do some polling. A good time to do polling is going to be middle, summer of next year, fall of next year at the latest, really, to kind of understand what that policy looks like. Growing that coalition, you want to be deep into that a year out. You don't want to start talking to people, in April of next year about how they can be involved in the campaign, or 2024. You don't want to start talking to them about being involved, because you want them to be part of making what this ballot measure looks like. The more invested people are in the ballot measure itself, the more they're going to be invested in the campaign. About 6 to 9 months out is when you really want to have your committee set up and launch, right? Because you're developing the coalition, you're developing the plan, you're getting that signature gathering operation set, you're getting the policy set, and then come fall of 2023 into early 2024, you're collecting those signatures in the beginning of 2024, probably sometime between March and July of 2024 is when you would set up that actual campaign committee, right? You're ready to go. You have found out if you qualified in July of 2024, you would find out if you definitely qualified. You have no time to waste. You need to be ready to go once that happens, meaning, you know, have your branding set, right? You'll get your number or your letter. Are you measure A or are you proposition 12, you know, whatever it is, that'll come out in July. You want to have all the branding out there. You want to be ready to go. You want your coalition to be owning it and to be talking about the campaign as soon as you qualify. So that's, you know, being prepared 6 months out. Really 4 months out is when you'll have the number, you'll have the letter. You want to start talking to voters immediately after you have that letter and that number. What does that look like on the field side, knocking on doors, you know, at farmers markets, coordinating to make phone calls. You can coordinate with other campaigns. If you've got other ballot measures that, you know, 2024 is going to be a huge cycle. There may be statewide ballot measures that you want to jump on board with, other local ballot measures. You can work together. You know, this is the family agenda, voting yes on measures A, C, and D, right? That voter contact, talking to voters, that's going to really be happening via paid communications. So mail, digital advertising primarily. Also, do you have an in-language, you know, component? Do you have a really large Spanish-speaking population? What do you need to do to communicate with them? Do you have a large Chinese community and, you know, Cantonese or Mandarin? Making sure you know what that in-language program looks like. And that's really intense from Labor Day, you know, through Election Day. GOTV, that sort of final phase, we are no longer talking about just Election Day. We're talking about people voting, you know, about a month out, right? We know that early vote and starts, and in California, we're all getting a ballot in the mail. Those ballots are generally hitting between October 5th and October 12th. So that's when people are voting. So anyone we want to mobilize, we got to get out the word to them. Can't wait till the 4 days before Election Day. Text messages are really good and cheap way of doing that. Voter calls, all of this can engage volunteers and engage young people, but you got to start now. So hopefully that's sort of a helpful overview of what the next 2 years can look like.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah.
I presented a more aggressive timeline than you did,
Sure.
just because I am so concerned about the cost of signatures.
I
And
hear you.
so it was a couple months more aggressive than yours, but I'm hoping that as people hear the scope of what they're going to do, you know, once the campaign starts, and like, how do I get in a position to be able to do that? And all the things I laid out about, you know, what you have to do to get to a point where you can develop a policy proposal and where you do have, you know, where you are, have the coalition to do that. I am like, that you sort of understand, and you understand why Monterey started 6 years ago thinking about this. And so people will be on various different timelines. I don't know if people have questions now. I guess what I want to sort of say is it's the most fun you'll ever have, in my opinion, having been the head of a child advocacy organization, having done all kinds of work to promote, you know, good policy and good practice and work with young people. A campaign is the most fun you'll ever have. So do people asked a couple? Yes, we're recording this. Yes, I will be sending you this. I am going to just take the liberty for a minute to go back to my screen sharing and sort of tell you some of the lessons that we've learned about the power of nonprofits, about the power of bringing youth and parents together and engaging them in the campaigns. Everybody says they want to do it. This is a parent testifying at a board of supervisors. This is about the importance of staff, and you can see that. You know, I can't tell you how many beginning meetings I went to with people. Yes, we want to do this. We want to do it. And you go back to the next meeting and nothing has happened because there's nobody to staff this effort. And by the way, foundations can help with like documenting the case and doing the polling and researching revenue options and doing a report card and analyzing what you're currently spending. These are all things that foundations are willing to pay. We learned a lot about the importance of drama in these campaigns. This is a group of parents at a Board of Supervisors meeting in Sonoma where they had printed out a list of all the people on waiting lists for childcare. Oh my God, it was so powerful. I mentioned earlier the idea of having, these are two members of the Board of Supervisors in San Joaquin County, who we started a children and youth policy group and invited them to co-chair it, and it became an official arm of the of San Joaquin County. Made a huge difference to have electeds. We, of course, you figure out really early on, this was a really early thing we did in San Francisco to use the media. As Nicole said, oh my, there is opposition. The anti-tax movement is alive and well in California. There are competing priorities. Law enforcement and roads are particularly upset when you start saying about money going to kids. So you have to prepare for opposition. You have to sort of start now becoming best friends with the fire department. I think they finally figured out how to neutralize the fire department in Sacramento. Their cannabis tax will pay for the youth programs of the fire department. And this is something Nicole taught me, that we're all really good at persuasion and we don't know how to play political hardball. So that you need to do both and go back to my version of the timeline, which is a little more aggressive than
That's good. It's good to be more aggressive.
But what?
I said it's good to be more aggressive. So
yeah, because you know, Jesus learned this the hard way about the importance of being aggressive. And here is just one more point to make, which is you may decide you're not ready, but you can keep your eyes open. As Nicole said, there's somebody doing a measure in your city or county as we speak. It may be a library measure, and you get in bed with the library people and say, let's do something together, or we'll help you with your measure if in 26 you help with ours. So people are forming alliances with like-minded groups is a really important thing to do. And then your county or city might put a general tax on the ballot, which will only require a 50% vote if your supervisors or city council does it. You be at the table for every step of those meetings and demand that when that passes and the county can do whatever they want with the money, that a significant percent goes to kids. And, you know, do talk about keeping the vision alive and don't let anybody think, oh yeah, Biden solved the problem or the Newsom solved the problem. Not true. So I do want to say that we're here to help you. And I'd love hearing from people like, this is realistic. What should I be thinking about? I'm going to send you all this material. And hopefully you'll be able to sort of sort through it, and it will add a lot of depth to this. We're having a 3-day institute in the spring. We will keep doing seminars on this. I just wanted to get people starting thinking about this early on. And I understand we have a young person from Sacramento, Kennedy's on the line, who may want to share her. Veronica, is Kennedy still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
You know, I have all these people on my screen. So,
Monica
Hi,
here
Margaret.
too.
oh, hello, Monica. So Kennedy, you have any words of wisdom for these people? We have 2 more minutes.
Monica, I feel like just staying positive and pushing through it. I mean, like you said, this is like our third effort, and we have our city council meeting tonight, and so we think it's gonna go really, really well. So just but there is still people who, you know, do oppose it, and that's always gonna be there. So I think just staying persistent and trying to focus on the positives and not on those people who may be going against you.
Thank you. And I did do a poll. Can you see it? So the answer was,
Yes.
hey, after this session, are you considering a ballot measure for 2024? No. Yes, maybe. Well, so has everybody, if when I end this, I will be able to see the results, right? Okay. Well, anybody else want to chime in? Hey, look, if everybody who said yes does it, and half the people who say maybe, share results. Do it. We will have tons of money in California at the local level for young people. So do you have any final words, Jesus?
No, I'm rooting for you, Kennedy, and Sanchez first. That's really cool. So just congratulations on getting this far, and like, you have the right mindset. Don't stop.
And I'd like to remind people this is their third effort. So you don't always win the first time, but they are inspired. And this is going to be transformative in Sacramento. And just the fact that they've done it, it already is. So thank you for coming. I'm going to send you materials. Call me. Love to talk more and provide people with support from Nicole. We have pollsters we work with, we have lawyers we work with, and we can help you even analyze your budget, how much money is going to kids. So eager to help, and thank you for coming.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna end this.